an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Jane the Virgin, Season 2, Episode 19, Chapter 41. In this episode, so much is going on, but really the thing that I am the most interested in and the most sympathetic with is poor Shamara, who gets a chance at something and then blows it. I feel so bad for her. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Natalia for commissioning this episode. And once again, being flexible. I have done nothing but reschedule all year, guys. And finally, my computer just really hit a wall. And I was able to get it going again, but it's clearly temporary. And I am going to be placing an order for a new computer. And it's probably going to be a couple weeks until I get it. So, there's just going to be some bumps in the road. Sorry about it. So, guys, this episode is so packed with weird little moments, but the thing that I already said that I really sympathize with Shamara. One of the main events here is Michael getting fired. And what we've got is a situation where Jane can potentially keep them going because they're not even in their new place fully yet or I think they have just moved in at the beginning of this, but it is possible that they can make it happen. And he's looking at getting other work, and in the end he eventually does start working for her father, which I know he probably sees as a major step down, this is a humiliation, and I really get that. But also, I feel like that's probably going to be a plum deal. And I don't think it's going to be easy because Rogelio is kind of high maintenance in just so many ways. So the issues with money in this show I always find really interesting because it's the show definitely wants us to remember that Jane grew up without a lot of money, that she is somebody who is aware of the value of money and what it can get you in a way that not everybody needs to be. And we start off with her putting money in a piggy bank and not being able to fit it in because she's got so much in there already. And I like the fact that we know this and get reminded of it, but there are times where the way the show handles them not having had money, and I'm saying having had money because while Jane's money and, oh my god, Rafael's money are separate, she still really does have a massive cushion, right? Just because they aren't using his money to pay their grocery bills and, their mortgage or whatever, that doesn't mean that were there to be a massive emergency, he wouldn't help and step in. And that's really the main thing, is that when you are somebody who grew up without money, but you still had somebody to fall back on, your situation is really, really different. Jane grew up without money and she didn't have the fallback. This is a new development. So I'm not trying to say that about her, but I just think there's a lot of people out there who they try and compare their situation to folks who grew up truly in poverty. And I will say this about myself, I there was always aunts and uncles in the background that I knew if something went truly, truly wrong, we could probably get help from them, but they weren't close, you know? And it was the sort of thing that when I say truly, I mean if we were foreclosed on and got kicked out in the middle of the night kind of emergency. If we're having trouble making our mortgage payment, my parents are not reaching out to them. And then once I got older, it was certainly not going to be appropriate for me to like go to them for help. And I wound up, having to rely on my parents if I had to, which was a real iffy thing. My father was able to help me out a couple times, but it wasn't like it was coming from a finite source, and I knew that, and it was embarrassing to have to ask, and I did have to pay him back. It wasn't something that like, I just got the situation handled for me. So it's interesting in this episode to see the whole way that her like approach to money is so different, because Shamar is sitting there saying the whole point to saving money is so that you can save it up to buy something. And Jane says, no, the point of saving money is so that you have something when you're in an emergency. And Shamara says, not when you're 7. You don't have to worry about money. Please just buy anything. And she says, fine, another piggy bank, which is pretty adorable, actually. But I will say, saying you're 7, you don't have to worry about money to somebody who, you like, Jane is smart and aware of the limitations of the household. And clearly, she is the type to shoulder more responsibility than is probably healthy, even at her age. So I couldn't help but be like, that is a very easy thing to just say. But for myself, I know how aware of money I was even when I was fairly young. And I I think that adults sometimes, because we don't have to worry about it, they think that we just don't comprehend it when we're kids. And that's not really it at all. Um, so yeah, we go to her in the present, and I don't think they've moved into their new place. They haven't yet. I was saying that, but this is clearly the Marbella in the background because we've got like this ocean view right now. So she is choosing between a couple of different rugs that are going to be in the baby's room, and they have a cart that's full. And of course, this is a little like Target plug as well, so we get like the price tag and the little logo and everything, and I can't help but laugh because I actually think this show has been fairly good about like shoehorning them in ways that feel realistic because money is an issue and it just makes sense. So she goes to the cart, and there's almost $600 worth of things in it, and she's like, you know what, we can't do this. And of course, this is just before Michael gets fired, so he doesn't know. And he says, no, no, no. Come on, we've got 2 incomes now, and it's our first home together. It should be special. Plus, what about Matteo's zoology career? Because she's looking at the giraffe rug. And she says, I will leave it in my car overnight and I'll think about it. And I just want to just touch briefly on the way that I shop. So, I am a extremely particular about what it is I want. If you're watching this on camera, you can see how many of my accessories in my office and on my desk are all like the exact same shade of pink. I will look forever until I find the exact thing that I want. And then I will sit on it for like a month before I pull the trigger, because for me, money is so unpredictable. Like, I am making almost $1,000 less a month on Patreon this year than I was in 2020. 2020 pandemic, that sucked, but it was great for my business. I was doing well, and it worked out because I was getting married and I really needed the extra money. So, you know, the drop in income came after the wedding, and thankfully I didn't feel it as badly because I wasn't like siphoning money off to pay for things the way that I had been. But it's a fucking squeeze, and it's really hard to know sometimes if you're going to be able to like sustain the income that you have now from month to month. It's a very, very unpredictable thing working the way that I work. So I don't like to jump in and buy things when there's a chance that something could go wrong. I give it time. So letting it sit in the cart overnight. I mean, I have Amazon, like I have stuff in the cart, and then I have about 30 things in save for later, and I have 6 different wish lists for different things. I've got the podcast wish list, I've got my resin wish list, I've got my couple wish list between me and Owen, I've got like my personal wish list of things that I'm just wanting to buy myself eventually, and then like the gift wish list that's like forward facing for everybody to see. And this is how I organize between the things that I want, and I update those like frequently. Like I am not somebody who makes a wish list, forgets about it, and then somebody buys me something and I'm like, oh, this was in that list. I know what's in every list because I am very careful about it. And the sticker shock of seeing everything at once, that is so real. Like, I am very dishonest with myself sometimes when it comes to what I'm spending. If I can spend it in small bits and pieces, it fools me into thinking I'm not spending as much. So, this sort of thing where I see the cart full of every item that I want, and that's $600, absolutely not. What I do is I put away 2/3 of that. I spend $150 today, and then I see how it goes over the next couple weeks. And maybe I still wind up spending that same $600. It's just over the course of a month and a half. And I tell myself I saved money. I did not save money. I just spent it at a different time. That's not different. That's not like, you know, it still matters because of the way my income works, but nevertheless, it is me kind of fooling myself, you know? So, anyway, this was just very, very relatable. And, like, in terms of being particular about what it is that I want, I am also very intent on getting a deal. Like, I buy almost everything on Amazon, used like new, or used like very good. Those are the two tops. And a lot of things on Amazon you can find in the used category. It doesn't always work out. There have been times where I've gotten something that somebody clearly like kept the power cord and sent the rest of it back because they evidently just needed that one power cord. Like, honestly, I'm not even mad at that. But mostly it has worked out pretty well. And I do that for everything that I buy refurbished computers and stuff. This time I may not. When I replace this computer, I may just do like fucking new. Um, but yeah, this whole like mindset and the way that she's letting herself like kind of take a minute and really consider how much of this do I need? Yeah, I get it. Um, so they get a knock that interrupts them, and it's room service bringing their breakfast and their paper. And on the very front page is a huge article. And I don't know who wrote this. I'm really curious because we know that there was this other guy who was sort of targeting Raphael and the Marbella that Jane was in grad school with. So I don't know if it's supposed to be him, but it's huge letters: bungled the corrupt and compromised investigation of Sin Rostro by the Miami Police Department. And I this is so funny to me because like it feels so classic finding this out like from the newspaper. It's the sort of thing that I think if this were filmed just a couple of years later, it would be a really different thing how they found out about this. Like, Michael would be getting texted by a bunch of people or tagged in stuff on Facebook. And it sort of surprises me that it was done this way because it just does feel like, we're in 1960 here. And I kind of I always like to pause and see if I can read the article because occasionally there'll be something like really perfect in it. So I'm pausing it here. He is in a relationship with an employee of the Solano-owned Marbella, and that Rafael Solano had a child with the employee. There are many points of connection that should have been red flags to remove Detective Cordero. And then let's see. As if Detective Cordero's connection to the Marbella Hotel and Solano family weren't enough, it seems that Cordero and the Miami PD also thoroughly mismanaged evidence that could lead to Mooter's whereabouts. The police also failed to search a boat belonging to Mooter's son, Derek Ruvel. Ravel, who had been laying low for years, has recently resurfaced in Miami and been seen many times by multiple sources spending a lot of time with Rafael Solano at the Marbella. Detective Cordero is responsible for the death of Sinrostro. In addition to that, he let Mutter get away and left a giant mess behind with no leads and no arrests. The only bigger mystery than the Sinrostro and Mutter saga is the Miami PD's decision to keep Detective Cordero as the case's lead detective. It seems that any time a choice can be made regarding this case, it is the wrong one. This is pretty brutal. Man. I'm sorry. There's one more bit that I want to read. What has been one of Miami's most riveting stories of organized crime has gotten even more twisted. Details are coming out that prove the Miami Police Department's investigation of the elusive criminal Sinrostro has been corrupt since the beginning, and it all starts with the investigation's lead detective, Michael Cordero Jr. Um, and we have more of like the points of connection, so they just kind of take it and then repeat the same article a little bit further on for the effect for this shot. That makes sense. But yeah, I actually like that, because sometimes you'll pause it and it'll be a little bit sort of janky, and that feels like fairly close to an actual article. And he winds up like they were having this lovely moment, and he has to go in and deal with this immediately. um and yeah, he starts, oh, I didn't even remember that he starts reading this out loud. Oh my god. The whole idea about their connection being a red flag, there's a part of me that understands why they would think that, and then there's a part of me that's like, well, that's sort of how this all like worked. But it just feels like a hit piece. There's somebody out there who's like trying to get at him, and I can't help but think like, what I keep suspecting is Raphael's brother. And I don't really know why. It just seems like the way that he got Raphael to admit, yeah, I was the one who told him I wasn't sure about you. It felt like a test, like he was putting him in the crosshairs like on purpose here. I don't know. Um and Jane, very understandably, is like, listen, it's going to blow over. There'll be a like new news story in a couple days. And he does seem genuinely comforted by that, but when they step outside their door, all of the hotel rooms have a newspaper sitting in front of them, which is very funny because like that suggests that every single room is occupied and every single person ordered a newspaper, but it really does get the point across that, yeah, in a couple days it probably will blow over, but up until then it's going to be a real issue. So, yeah, this the scene segues right into the whole thing about his brother getting searched, and Raphael saying, I didn't tell anyone. And he's lying, but he keeps eye contact, and it seems like he's, if I were his brother, I think I would believe him. That was pretty good. So we then cut to Petra, who is reading this article, very irritated about how many times the Marbella is mentioned. And he asks her if she wants to change a diaper. He's holding both twins. And she says, no, thanks. I changed one a few days ago. But I'll hold one of them while you do it. And then, this is so great to me, I feel so much better because she's taking those antidepressants. And she says, I now I can accept the fact that I'm just not one of those maternal moms, and I'm fine with that. They're cute in small doses. And she calls her Anna, but she's actually holding Elsa, and she doesn't know how to tell which is which because she's so unfamiliar with them. So this is something that I kind of enjoy, and I'm really interested to see how they keep going with this, because like I I really don't know how much this sort of thing matters in the greater scheme of things. Like, do babies recall who's the one changing their diapers and holding them the most? Does it matter until they start to develop more of like a memory and personality that she is like not retaining information about them? Or I really wonder how this is going to go. And I almost think like, are we going to ever do like a jump ahead in time? I sort of hope not. I I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, she says, "Okay, I want to talk about their trust funds." And he says, "I have a copy in my bag." And she asks, "Is it the same as Matteo's?" And she gives Raphael a pointed look, and he says, "Of course, they're siblings." But we know that that is not true. And there's a real like brief moment before he answers her where he hesitates, and it seems pretty clear that she's aware. She knows him well enough to know when he's lying. So this is when her sister comes in. And you guys, everything about the way she's playing her own twin is amazing. She can't even quite stand in those heels. I don't know if anybody else caught that, but she's on a carpeted floor in the sort of like skin tone. She's got her skin tone shoes on to go with the Marbella uniform, and her knees are sort of like knocking together because she's having so much trouble balancing on the carpet that she can't. What a detail to put in, that she wouldn't be used to being in these heels and not really know how to stand or anything, you know? I just really love how far she's going with this in terms of the body language being so different, and she isn't looking at Raphael clearly having a crush on him. The whole vibe is so like uncomfortable. And she is going to be training to, waitress in the restaurant. Now I'm just going to summarize the whole thing with her as a disaster. At one point, I can't remember the guy's name, is it Peter? But he tells Petra that her sister Aniska is doing great, but she obviously, as like an owner, a big wig, he's not going to tell her the truth. And this is what's so hard about working in industries like this, especially something like this. Like, I worked at a place like this where it was family owned, and they would get their own family jobs there, and it wasn't like these people they weren't actively taking advantage exactly, but it was sort of like they had a whole different standard for them than everybody else. And to a degree, I can't even really fault them, because I know if I owned a hotel and I hired one of my like little cousins, I would have a different standard for my little cousin than some random. I would be more understanding with them about fucking shit up or give them an extra chance. So I'm not even trying to play about that. But that does result in some really iffy service, because then people aren't being honest about it. And Aneska is so like, I was really curious once I realized that she was going to be a bad server, how that was going to go, because she is very eager to please people. It's quite clear. So I was sort of going, well, what's the angle going to be then? And it's just going to be that she has no idea what's appropriate, and the way that she talks to people, and somebody is like, "Oh, there's onions on this," and she just picks them off. I mean, it's so awkward and uncomfortable, and eventually Jane is tapped to like help train her, and she is better. She is. By the end of the episode, she actually gets a tip. It's only like $2 on, I'm guessing, a $40 bill, but nevertheless, it's something. Um so yeah, I just kind of love this whole storyline, as awkward as it is. Um, so okay, then we're going to go to Jane, who runs into the sitter for Matteo at the hotel. She, there was like a change in plans, and she had given Matteo to Raphael to watch. He calls a sitter to take over without telling her. And she had made an agreement with him that if something like this happened, we would talk to one another before just calling a sitter. And she later on, there's a sort of like thing with this between the two of them, because of how the her swooping in like this and sort of taking over. He comes back to swoop him back, and eventually he says, I think that we have an issue here with the way that things are. Like, we need to have, I think, a firmer custody agreement. And it's very clear when he starts to say this how nervous he is. But I was really glad at Jane's response. She's super reasonable, stops to think about it, and is like, her instinct, you can see, is sort of to be like, wait, what? But once she stops and thinks about it, somebody like Jane loves rules. A person coming in, mediating, telling them what to do, of course she's going to like that. That totally tracks, you know? So the whole like what this winds up being is that they are in agreement on most things when they wind up meeting with the mediator, until there comes a point where they start talking about future vacations when their kid is like a teen, and he wants to bring his son to Europe for like a month, and Jane freaks out a little bit. Now by the end of the episode, she cools off and realizes like what's best for her kid. Traveling Europe for a month would be amazing. But her immediate reaction is, I'm not going a month without seeing my son. And I just wanted somebody to ask her, what do you think is going to happen to him when he starts to get older, Jane? He's going to go away to school. You don't know that he's going to go to school nearby. I'm sure that you would prefer that, but you aren't the type to just make him do a thing, I don't feel. So he could very easily be somebody that you don't see for several months at a time by a certain age. So, and also as somebody who like left home fairly early, I benefited so much from doing that. And like I said, eventually she like calms down and really understands and meets him halfway on this. But it's definitely a bit of a moment between the two of them. And what leads her to understanding this is this job that she is doing. So Michael getting fired, obviously leading to some financial issues, and she decides that she is going to help people write their college essays for money, which sounds fine, except that she misunderstands the intent when people hire her and expects them to be paying her to tutor somebody on writing it, not that she will write it. This is something, you guys, that I had never considered, and I don't know why. I am so hyper aware of so many of the different advantages that kids with money at my school had when they were applying to colleges, and the preparation that they had for the SATs and all of this sort of thing. But I never thought about somebody just coming in and writing their essay for them. And as somebody who like obsessed a little bit over my essay, the concept of just paying someone to come in and do it with no not necessarily any knowledge of the person, or it made me so incredibly angry. Like I just, and she's being offered quite a lot, you know, and I understand why she is so conflicted about taking that money. Eventually, she's just like, I can't do this. But you know, this is something that I feel like when you really look at it, this is at the root of why people who with extreme wealth are usually bad people. You don't get that kind of wealth without compromising your ethics along the way. I'm sorry, you just don't. And you can quote me on that. I don't care. And if you are a person with a really strong conscience and moral center who needs to believe in what they're doing for work, not everybody needs that. And I'm not saying if you don't need that that you are a bad person. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you are somebody who is like that, there are going to be some places that you draw the line because you know that you're not going to be able to live with yourself. And then there are people who can live with themselves just fine, and it just does not bother them at all. And it really makes me so sad to know that the difference between a good person winding up with a lot of money where they would feel like they have an obligation to help their fellow man, the very fact that they have a personality in where they want to help precludes them from getting to the point where they have that kind of money anyway. Like, I feel that's just the way it has to work. You don't, if you are running a company and you wind up making the kind of money that shoots you into billionaire status, there is no way that company isn't run by thousands of other people who deserve like a lot of that money because they are the ones supporting you. But the reason you get that to that position is because you're not sharing. You're paying them as little as you can get away with, you know? So anyway, this whole thing, it was just like really tough because being offered $1,500 just to write an essay when you like to write, it doesn't sound that bad, but the whole like ethics of it, even setting aside in a vacuum, Jane has had to apply to schools. And so I'm sure it rubs her the wrong way to know that there were people probably submitting and things that they had not written and then getting in ahead of her or being considered at least. And her contributing to that like inequality, I that would be galling. So yeah, that eventually the kid that she is like helping, she finds out that he really loves music and is super passionate about music. But when she talks to his mother about it, she does not want to hear it and is just like, my kid is going to school for economics. You're writing an article about how much he cares about economics. I don't give a shit. And Jane realizes that as a parent, you can approach things a few different ways, and that she doesn't want to be this kind of person who dictates what her child is going to do above what that kid is passionate about. And that's what gets her to change her mind. And I thought that that was a really well constructed little story, you know? Um so let's talk about Rogelio and oh my god, I can't remember her name, the writer that he is seeing. Uh Dina, I feel like it is. So the two of them had just had sex. She walks off saying, "We're not doing this again." But the narrator informs us that that is what she said the last 12 times. So there's a whole thing where the way that they are each approaching this relationship, they are not on the same page at all. So there's a part available in Rogelio's show for a silent movie actress. And Shamara wants to audition for the part, and he immediately is like, "Oh, there's no need to audition. The part is yours." And I really enjoy the way that this is framed. She's like, "I don't want any preferential treatment." And he says, "Don't be ridiculous. I'm a huge proponent of nepotism. There's no need to audition." You guys, I'm a huge proponent of nepotism. Is so funny. It's such an interesting thing, too, to me, seeing these actors out there who are like getting called nepo babies because their parents were big stars before them and they get really bent out of shape about it. And it's just like the same as anybody getting called out on their privilege. Just being called a nepo baby isn't an insult. People take it as an insult and it can be a bit dismissive sounding, but like, let's be real. You had access that other people wouldn't have had. It's just a fucking fact. And the fact that they can just bury their heads and just be like, I got it on talent. No, you didn't. You got it because of connections. Maybe you have talent. That's not the same thing. Plenty of people out there have talent, and I guarantee there are plenty of people out there with more than you, but you just wound up in a spot. And I don't begrudge people that. Take advantage of those connections. Absolutely. I would absolutely be doing the same thing. But like, be honest with yourself about it, you know? Just don't lie to me. Don't lie to yourself. So he offers her the part. And then when he is talking to Dina later, she's like, "Well, has Shamara ever acted before? Has she ever acted in Spanish?" And all of the questions that she's asking are valid, but Rogelio, who wants this to be a different thing than it is sort of like, "Oh, are you jealous of having her on set?" And it's so clear that's not what's going on. The tone that she's got, her body language, it's not about Shamara being an ex. There's no part of it, you know? So Meanwhile, Shamara is watching him, and he walks up to her and he does the sniff on her hair, and you see Shamara sort of like straighten and look a little, oh god, you know. And later on, when she's talking to Jane, she says, he's sleeping with Dina. I know he is. He did the sex sniff. And we see a montage of them and him doing the sniffs that apparently start him off with like getting horny. And every time she's sort of like, yeah, all right, let's do this. Except for the final one where she's watching TV and she just says, I'm sorry, I'm not in the mood. And he looks so sad. So yeah, she knows for sure and is just a little surprised at how fast he moved on. And she thinks it's not going to be a problem, the two of them working together. But later on, she admits to herself that it is actually harder than she expected it to be. Um, so I love that in the midst of all this, by the way, because of this silent movie thing, we're getting a lot of like little scenes where everybody is in costume and we're having the silent movie like version of the scene. And I just love when the show does these little themes. I just love it. It's very fun. Nothing ever has topped the wrestling episode. Like that's just the best one. But this silent movie one is pretty enjoyable. And I love the way that like the difference in the way that Raphael is dressed versus Michael. There's also like the Shamar or Aneska waiting on somebody, and all of these are just such like good little ways to lighten the scene. Um, so eventually Dina, I hope that her name is Dina. I feel like it is. I think I got it, but there's nobody here to tell me, so I'm just going to go with it. Um, she and Rogelio later, he says something about how Shamara knows that we're together, and she instantly says, "Did you tell her we're not?" And he says, "Well, yeah, of course." But you can tell he's a little hurt. And then he's like, "But like we are something, right?" And she's like, "No, we're not." And when he had been talking earlier, I think to Shamara about Dina, he says something about how Dina isn't like glamorous enough for him to be seen with. She's not TMZ enough. He's very snobby about it. And I wanted to think that he was just saying this to sort of be like, oh, it's not a big deal. But I really think he is this much of a snob. Like, Rogelio is a lovely guy in a lot of ways, but he has his real blind spots and real, what's the word I want here? He is a very ambitious person and sees a lot of things through the lens of what is going to make his career better. So it makes him into someone who is ultimately really selfish a lot of the time. And so he's saying all of this, but then when she is like, I am not interested in this being a public thing that folks know about, it's clear he is taking this very badly. And it reminded me a little bit, there's a 30 Rock where Jenna Maroney sleeps with one of the writers. I can't remember his name. And she comes in the next day, like prepared for everybody to be humiliating her because this guy is so far beneath her, in her opinion, in terms of appearance, in terms of like his place in the hierarchy of the show. And when she comes in, she thought he was going to have bragged about it to people, and he has not said a word. And he pulls her aside and is like, please don't tell anybody. And she is so offended that he wants to hide it when she thought he was going to use her as a way to like make himself look good, and gets like really angry about it and winds up telling everybody that she slept with him because she's just like, well, fuck you then, even though allegedly she didn't want anybody to know about it. I don't really think that's what's going to happen here, but I do like the fact that Rogelio thinks that he wants a certain type, and here comes somebody who doesn't really fit the bill at all, according to what he claims, but it's still doing something to him. She is still interesting him a lot. And I can't tell if he's like really got feelings for her or if it's just that he is coming off of Shamara and that he is in that first stage of like getting when you're in the first stages of a relationship and getting to know somebody, it can be really intense and fool you into thinking that you feel things you don't really feel because you're in a bit of a haze. So anyway, that's what's going on with them. And then, like I said, Shamara blows it. She's supposed to be this silent film star. She comes up, or he comes up to her, and the whole scene is meant to be in Spanish. And she accidentally says her line in English when she's not supposed to. Now, then when she tries to redo it, she's thinking so hard about not saying it in English that she forgets her line entirely and just sits there kind of staring. And they try this a bunch of different ways until eventually she is just like literally reading the line off of his chest. And he tells her, "Don't worry, we're going to fix it in post." I saw Jurassic World. Later on, Dina shows him. I love that when he says, "I saw Jurassic World," they hashtag it Shamarasaurus. This show, you guys, it's just so good. But we see the way that they fix it. And when he's like, "Well, what the fuck is this?" Dina's like, "Dude, we don't have a budget to do that sort of thing. This is the best we could do." And he realizes, like, this is not going to work. And it's so heartbreaking because he really wants to, like, give Shamara this opportunity. I understand the position that he is in, but yeah, I felt so bad. Um, so briefly, I'm going to jump over to Michael, who, after he gets fired, he starts going for interviews and he comes home pretty dejected. There was an interview that he had that he was feeling somewhat good about. But once he gets home, he says it was clearly just a formality. Like, nobody wants to touch me. Everything looks bad for me right now. And Jane is trying to insist, like, we're going to be okay. I'll make things up with my writing business, whatever we need to do. But it's really getting him down. The whole the men have a lot of their identity tied up in their work a lot of the time and like their role as a provider. And it can be very difficult when something happens, just, when that's like what they feel is their primary function in the maintenance of a relationship. Um, so he says that he is going to talk to Rogelio about like doing some damage control on his image and what he can do to sort of rehabilitate it. But when he talks to Rogelio, he says, "My PR person says the best thing to do is wait it out. If you address things with the press, you just fan the flames and extend the story," which is absolutely correct. And it is, I can't think of something harder to do. Like, you guys, I am such a fucking talker and I need to explain myself so often. If somebody was like circulating shitty talk about me on the street and I wasn't supposed to respond to it at all, I don't know. I guess I would just like make myself go on some sort of like island retreat and get a bunch of like spa treatments and stuff and just avoid, because I don't see otherwise how I manage to not say something. I would just be so constantly like framing in my mind what to say, how to write it. I would be doing that thing that you do where you rehash old arguments and think about what you should have said, except I would still be in a position where I could say it and that would drive me nuts. Like, I really, really understand why some celebrities can't help but comment on stuff. It's just an instinct to want to defend yourself and explain yourself. I don't think it often does any good. There's been a few cases where celebrities have come out and said something and it's been like, okay, you know what? But it's really rare because mostly people just get defensive and they don't actually apologize or acknowledge what they did. And that's really the main issue. Um, but that's not like the situation here with Michael. It's a very different thing. And the whole like the letting it blow over works with a high profile sort of thing, but I'm not sure if that would change anything for him getting hired other places. It's really hard to say because, like, in reality, a guy like Michael just gets transferred to another unit. He doesn't really get fired. That's so rare, you know? But once I saw him walking with Rogelio here, I started to be like, wait a second, this might be something. So Rogelio says, like, I'm gonna invite you into your dressing room or into my dressing room. And he opens the door and lets Michael in. And Michael sees like that there's not even a lock on the dressing room door. And he says, dude, you just had a mentally ill stalker take you hostage somewhere. How do you not have a lock? And Rogelio gets this look on his face and he says, it's just that locks. That's how she kept me prisoner. So, and Dina says, so what? You still need locks because, yes, indeed, she is in the room already. She's right there. Um, so this is what Michael is going to do. I personally am elated. I want Michael to have the income, and I have to assume the income with Rogelio is going to be a lot more than what he was making on the force. I understand that he's not in an official capacity, so that's probably going to hamstring some of the things that he could do in the story. But him and Rogelio together are so delightful that now that we've got the two of them like in the same place so often for this story, I am very excited. I really, really am. The two of them, we needed more of them together. And I think that this is a really smart way to do that. So there is a point briefly where Petra talks to Jane about the trust fund, and Jane acts really weird. And I couldn't tell if it was that she didn't know about the trust fund or if she was aware that the trust fund was different than Petra's and she didn't really want to like say anything. You know, it felt because Jane doesn't lie very often. So to me, I got the impression that she just didn't know about it and felt uncomfortable even like finding out. But if anybody listening has their own interpretation, I'd be very interested to hear because I just couldn't decide what was going through her head here. But at following that, Petra goes to speak to Raphael and she says, um, I wanted to talk to you about this whole thing because you know, she is getting exactly what I want for our kids. They aren't the same trust, and you know that. If you die, Jane controls Matteo's trust, but I don't control the twins, some lawyer does. And he says, yes, that's correct. Even though you and I are in a good place now, it hasn't always been that way. You've done some things. And we get this lovely moment of her thinking this like music that's sort of cheerful playing, and then there's like a scroll of all of the things that she has done. Cheated on him with his best friend, stole his sperm, tried to get him arrested for domestic abuse, covered for her mother after she pushed Jane's grandmother down the stairs, held a man hostage, stole his sperm again, hid grenades. I forgot about the grenades thing. And it cuts off there. And she says, yeah, okay, but things are different now, aren't they? And he says, very different. Yes, and I do like the place that we are in. But if you're asking me if I trust you as much as I trust Jane, the answer is no. And you can understand why, right? And she gets a look. And you guys, I loved this whole conversation because there's more than one. This is my favorite type when more than one person is right. He indeed has good reason to not trust her, but she has an amazing response to him when she talks to him later because that scene just ends and she is when she confronts him later she's like, look, I'm gonna go to the scene so that she comes in again, um and sorry. I signed the estate plan, an independent trustee is fine. And he says, thank you. And look, you have changed. I know that. It's just a process, which is totally fair. And she says, yeah, it is. And frankly, I think I've made more improvements than you. You guys, I almost fell over. I loved this so much. This is so unexpected. He says, wait, what? And she says, when you're up against it, you still lie instead of just coming clean and facing the consequences. And I hope you change that soon. And she just leaves. And I was like, whoa. I was so proud of her. That was just such a good line. I you guys know I've just had my issues with Raphael in general. So it clearly hits him when she says that. And we jump to 2 hours later and he is telling his brother, I wanted to be honest, I did tell them about the boat. I found out about all of that before I trusted you. But now I do, and I wanted to come clean about it. But then we go to his brother getting on the elevator. He acts to Raphael's face like, thank you so much for telling me and for your honesty. But he gets on the phone and he says, it's a go, take him down. And this is the sort of thing where I'm like, it could be that he's talking about somebody other than, Raphael, and we're just meant to think it, but it really just doesn't seem like that. It seems like it's about Raphael. So let's see, I'm trying to find, okay, yeah, this is the point that I'm thinking about, because Jane is hugging Raphael in the hallway. They have this like little moment where they are realizing that if they both prioritize Matteo and they keep that in mind, they're going to get along okay. And they hug. And then we see that Anezka has walked around the corner and spots, or wait, no, it's not Anezka. Is it? Nope, it's actually Petra. I thought it was Anezka, you guys. I definitely did the first time I watched this. And she spots them, gets this like pang of jealousy and backs up and walks away. And she goes into her room, and after seeing this, when her sister gets up and says, I love Jane, she has helped me so much, Petra says, enough about Jane already, and apologizes and is just like, okay, look, I'm sorry. It's just, Jane is great, but I just have a complicated history with her. And a lot of it is me being a terrible person and her being basically perfect. And sometimes it just gets to be too much hearing about how wonderful she is all the time. And her sister asks, well, what's the history? And she begins to tell her the entire story. We cut away. And I should have seen this coming. When we come back, Aneska is realizing I've got to do something to help her out. And if it's Jane that is making her life difficult, I'll find a way to take Jane down, which is understandable that she would like want to do something to help them. She's not somebody who is above doing shady stuff, as we have seen. And in her opinion, she owes her sister so much. So I actually kind of get where she's coming from here. But what she decides to do is submit an ad to the school newspaper. And it's so weird. It's like, you guys, I don't even know how she thought to do this, but she reads the dictionary so that she can write this letter, which honestly probably wouldn't work because the translation of everything always is like really, really janky, but fine. And she does the contact us. I want to put an ad in the school newspaper for my essay writing business. But we see her picking the words out one letter at a time on the keyboard, and the passage of time and the room starts getting darker and everything. And they fast forward and gives her name, and she sends it. This is going to look quite bad for Jane. Now, this is the sort of thing. Ending the episode with this is meant to put us in a real moment of like, oh God, no, what's happening to Jane? But I can't help but think this is the sort of thing that's going to seem like a big deal and actually going to be something that blows over quite quickly. Like, it will be very easy to figure out that Jane didn't send this. Jane has decided not to do the essay writing thing anymore anyway. It's possible that this could still wind up being a problem for her, but I don't know. I just sort of think that it could resolve really quickly, and the issue then becomes like, well, what do we do about Aneska? I just want to say that for myself, I don't really want to watch a whole season, or I guess it's not a whole season because we are quite a ways through it by now. But I don't want to watch like a bunch of episodes in a row of Aneska trying to sabotage Jane, and Jane like getting wrongly accused of things over and over again. That just sounds really unpleasant to watch to me. That said, this show can find extremely entertaining ways to do stuff. So it's possible that I think I don't want to watch that. And then once I do, I'm like, this is great. Don't change a thing. So I'm going to try and trust them because mostly they do know what they're doing. But this sort of thing, normally it's like my really least favorite. But because Aneska is so well-meaning in a way here, and she is so like weirdly childlike in her understanding of stuff, it seems like it's hard for me to get as mad at this as a plot device as I would if this were an actively malicious person, like really just having some spite toward Jane and wanting to fuck her life up for that satisfaction only. This is a little bit more interesting also because like she's doing it for her sister, and it's not like Petra asked her to or realized this was what she was going to do. So there's like there really isn't the kind of ill will that I would find really annoying. And so we're sort of on like thin ice here, and I'm just going to wait and see. Um but okay, I'm going to wrap this one up. Thank you again so much, everybody, for listening. I really appreciate you all. Thank you, Natalia, for commissioning this one. And just all of you for bearing with me. It's appreciated. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.